This is Jamie Drummond for Good Food Revolution. I am here with Andrea Mullineux, all the way from Swartland. Is it Swartland or Swartland?
Swartland.
Swartland, South Africa. How are you today?
I'm doing fantastic.
Fantastic. So we've been speaking about your wines and we've been tasting them over the course of a wonderful tasting and luncheon at Bark on Roncesvalles in Toronto. Would you mind explaining a little bit about the philosophy behind your winery and the kind of wines you make?
Sure. So the Swartland region of South Africa is very dry, warm, breezy. So it's very conducive to making more naturally styled wines where we don't have to add yeast or malolactic bacteria, just a minimal amount of sulfur, preserve the integrity of the wine. So very hands-off winemaking. I'm really just the custodian of the wines. The grapes come into the winery in the perfect form of expression of terroir for the variety, for the region, for the climate, and it's just my job to make sure that I harness that and get it into the bottle that way.
Fantastic. Now you're actually part of a group of independent winemakers down in Swartland. Please, I'd love for you to tell our viewership a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that philosophy I just mentioned, hands-off winemaking, more naturally styled wines, and really showing the expression of the soil on which the grapes are grown rather than the flavor of a barrel or residual sugar or too much alcohol. That's really the main philosophy of the group of winemakers. We started it about 6-7 years ago, and we realized that we all had a similar ethos to try and capture the DNA of our region. It's not about marketing, it's about really giving the best expression and giving an identity to the area where we're making the wines.
I was quite fascinated with the choice of grape varietals that you have permitted within that particular union of independent winemakers.
Yeah, the grape varieties that we've chosen, that we are allowed to work with, are ones that have historically proven themselves suitable for the region. And sometimes they don't seem very obvious, but they're ones that have been planted there for decades and have adapted to the climate, have really worked. So, for example, Syrah and Chenin Blanc being the two main ones, and obviously Syrah is from the Rhone, Chenin Blanc's from the Loire, but the Chenin that is in South Africa is a different clone, and it's one of the original clones that was brought there 300 years ago. So it's really suited to the area. Totally dryland farms, so unirrigated bush vines. So if it works there, then it works well. And then obviously other Mediterranean varieties, Cinsault, Carignan, Grenache, Mourvèdre, Tinta Barroca from Portugal, also one of the other original varieties brought to the area. Semillon Gris, Semillon in general.
The famous Semillon Gris.
Yeah, Semillon Gris is. So it's a mutation of Semillon, just from certain clones of Semillon, and there's about 7 or 8 vineyards left in the world. I think 6 of them are in South Africa. So it's quite unique actually to South Africa and brings a real great salty texture to wines.
And this was just a kind of, I guess all of you came together and decided these varietals would be the ones that you'd be working with as this independent collective.
Absolutely, and we're always open to including new varieties, but people have to show examples of them where we're like, yes, this is a great example of that variety for the Swartland, which is the most important.
Fantastic. And how many other wineries are part of this collective?
There's about 25 to 30 of us now, and yeah, it's always growing. It's been quite amazing because 15 years ago there were about 5 wineries in the whole region, and now there's about 30 of us, which is really fantastic. It helps to really spread the message about the region and underlines that identity that we're trying to create.
And for those unfamiliar with the wines from the region, or what the region really should be showing in the glass, how would you typify the wines of the region? I know there are various wine styles coming from the region, but in your mind, what makes for a wine from Swartland?
For the red wines, one of the main signifying things is the soft but supple tannins that you get. They're never harsh. They're always very approachable when they're young, but the wines do age quite well. And also, the red wines do tend to be much more perfumed, and the white wines tend to be a little bit more spicy. And because the area, it's a very warm area, so the natural acidities are a little bit lower, but in a very approachable way, so it's what makes them go fantastic with food.
Now, you were speaking about the acidity versus pH. Would
Yeah.
you mind mentioning that again for this interview?
Sure.
Because I found that quite fascinating. I think some wine students would be kind of interested in that.
Yeah, so pH is the measure of active acidity, and so you can have low acid wines that also have low pH, which seems counterintuitive, but what's really happening is the grapes that we work with are very high in potassium, and potassium is very high in pH, and so when the potassium binds with the tartaric acid, you get potassium bitartrate, which is what precipitates out of the bottle or out of the wine and creates tartrates. And what happens then is you're lowering the pH, even though you're lowering the acidity. And what that means is that the wine feels fresh in the mouth, but without the tartness of acidity.
Superb. Well, thank you very much for introducing us to some stellar wines from Swartland this afternoon. And thank you very much for joining us at Good Food Revolution. We look forward to seeing you very soon, once again in Toronto, or perhaps, if the forces allow it to happen, down in South Africa.
Come down to South Africa. Cheers to you guys.
Bye for now.
Bye.